Our next speaker is...
Shelton Clinard. I got mics. Shelton Clinard.
And what are you going to talk about?
I'm going to be talking about reusability today, and really, is it worth it? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
Before you guys blow up my inbox and say a bunch of hate mail, let me say that, like, reusability, of course it's worth it, right? Our entire careers, we're told to kind of keep our code dry. Don't repeat yourself. So that's not really what I'm digging into here. Really what I want to get into is, where do we draw that line of reusability, right? Because there's a lot of instances where we live in the real world, where people make changes, where there's permutations of designs. And so what I want to talk about basically is, where is that line, right? So it's gonna be a little bit of a downer, but I want to start with a very sad story. So you get a request from maybe a stakeholder or a client, maybe a product manager, and they want you to build a sidebar. And you're like, oh, great, I can do this. Got a nice little heading, maybe some input fields, and a little submit button. This is great. But the client comes back and they're like, oh, but we also have a great content library, and we think some images are probably gonna drive conversion a little bit more. So you're like, fine, I'll throw a conditional in there. It's not a big deal, we'll all throw it into the same container. They're like, ooh, but on these 3 pages, we need a little checkbox at the bottom. And you're like, okay, this is getting out of control, but fine, I'll throw some checkboxes in there. And of course, they come back, oh, in this one edge case, if they check that checkbox, we need the fields to be required. I feel like this is probably something a lot of you guys deal with. I know I deal with it all the time. This is actually a real use case. So anyway, for the longest time, I kind of looked at these as one component and just tried to slam everything in together. And so over time, our teams kind of started to take the approach of, why don't we just make these individual containers? Is it really worth the effort to slam all these things together? And so now I kind of want to talk about like 2 strategies we use on our team to kind of cope with this issue, right? So first of all, there's a lot of similarities between these components, right? I mean, so the first question I kind of ask about those similarities is any functionality shared across any of these? And looking at them, absolutely. I mean, they're all forms. They're all going to probably post up to somewhere. They probably would have like a submitted state, maybe a success state, right? And so kind of look at that and we draw those lines, and I think that's an excellent use case for a mix-in, right? Because now we're still staying dry in a sense. So we might write a mix-in. This is a very simple example, but something like this that just kind of allows us to pull out the core functionality and still leaves us enough flexibility within each container, let's say the checkbox, right, to make the fields required. We don't have to slam all that into one thing. The next question we like to ask is, are any of the children shared, right? Because I mean, Vue is so great for this. And of course, there's a ton of shared components within this. They all have the same inputs. They all have a submit button. And so in this instance, we like to build up these things that we kind of call monolithic base components. And the idea is, no matter, if you're ever going to write code into a component that isn't being used, push that down into these base components. And that allows us to have these top-level containers that do exactly what they're tailored to do. And you have these very large chunks of code. This would be an input text example, right? This input text component might want to put regexes on a phone number, or maybe only accept numbers, or validate an email. A nice side effect to just an organization is you can kind of have some of your top-level developers down in the weeds, really digging around in these level components, and still allow more junior people up top to compose these things. And I think the composition that Vue allows us is really just perfect for this. So all in all, where I draw the line with reusability is really, am I writing the same code up top that's just not going to be used twice? And so if there's any takeaway that, or if you hate this idea, please come tell me. Anyway, thanks for your time, guys.